Welcome to the deep dive. We take a stack of research, a lot of information, and we try to boil it down to the essentials. Today, we're going to be diving into a revolutionary management concept. It's called digital self-management, or DSM, and we're going to be focusing on its real-world application at Tesla through the lens of Joe Justice, a former Tesla employee and a true innovator in agile manufacturing.
Yeah, Joe's insights are particularly valuable because, not only did he witness DSM at Tesla firsthand, but he also pioneered similar systems at Wikispeed, which is his company that builds these fuel-efficient modular cars using agile principles.
So for our listeners who might not be familiar with those, agile principles in manufacturing focus on this kind of iterative design, rapid prototyping, and just constant feedback loops. It's about adapting quickly to change rather than sticking to these rigid top-down plans.
Right, precisely. And Joe's experience at both Tesla and Wikispeed really positions him as a leading voice in understanding how technology can really reshape management structures.
So let's start, I guess, by unpacking this idea of DSM. It's often described as replacing human managers with software. Is that an accurate representation, or is it a little more nuanced than that?
I think it's a bit of both. The core principle of DSM, as Joe describes it, is that your boss is the data. So decisions are made based on real-time data analysis and feedback loops rather than hierarchical approvals. This does lead to a significant reduction in the need for traditional managerial roles, but it's not about eliminating human oversight entirely.
So instead of waiting for a manager's approval to make a change, engineers can see the impact of their decisions, almost instantly through the data and make adjustments accordingly.
Exactly. This leads to faster innovation because you're constantly experimenting and iterating based on real-time feedback. One of the most striking examples Joe highlights is Tesla's paint shop. So imagine sensors on the production line that are tracking the exact temperature, pressure, and application thickness at each stage of the painting process.
And that data is then fed back into the system, allowing the algorithms to fine-tune the robot settings in real time.
Precisely. And this level of granularity allows for dozens, sometimes even hundreds of adjustments per day. It's a level of optimization that would be impossible to achieve with traditional human-led quality control methods.
That sounds incredibly efficient, but wouldn't this create a very intense and potentially stressful work environment for the engineers? Are they constantly bombarded with feedback and pressure to optimize?
Yeah, it's certainly a fast-paced and demanding environment. Joe doesn't shy away from describing the long hours and the relentless pursuit of improvement. However, he also emphasizes that, it's incredibly rewarding, especially for engineers who thrive on problem solving and kind of pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
And this constant feedback loop seems to extend beyond just the technical aspects of production. Joe talks about justice boards, which display real-time performance data, project status, and even the company's financial health, all visible to everyone in the factory.
Yes, these justice boards are a fascinating aspect of DSM. They provide a level of transparency that's almost unheard of in traditional organizations. It's about fostering a sense of ownership and shared responsibility among employees.
But does this level of transparency come at a cost? Some would argue that it could create a culture of hyper-competitiveness and anxiety, especially if employees feel like they're constantly being monitored and evaluated.
That's a valid concern, and it's something that any organization implementing DSM needs to be mindful of. I think the key is to strike a balance between transparency and creating a supportive environment where employees feel empowered rather than overwhelmed by the data.
This brings up an important question, though. Can this model be successfully applied to industries beyond manufacturing? Or is it too specific to Tesla's unique context?
That's a question Joe grapples with himself. He acknowledges that replicating DSM as implemented at Tesla would be challenging for most organizations, especially those that don't have the same level of data capture and analysis capabilities.
So it's not just about implementing the right software. It's about building an entire organizational ecosystem around data-driven decision-making.
Exactly. And it requires a very specific type of workforce, one that's comfortable working in a highly autonomous, data-driven environment.
So Joe's experience with DSM seems to highlight the increasing importance of adaptability and comfort with technology in the modern workplace.
Absolutely. And it raises important questions about the evolving relationship between humans and machines. As AI and automation become more prevalent, it's crucial that we find ways to leverage these tools effectively while still preserving the value of human ingenuity and collaboration.
So while DSM might not be a direct blueprint for every organization, it does offer valuable lessons about the future of work and the need to adapt to a rapidly changing technological landscape.
Precisely. And as we move into a world where data is increasingly driving decision-making, understanding the principles of DSM will be crucial for organizations across all industries.
Now, we've talked a lot about the system itself, but let's shift our focus back to Joe Justice for a moment. His work seems to go beyond just implementing DSM. He's also exploring how to make this type of work more accessible and comfortable for a wider range of people. Can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. So Joe has developed a modified system that he calls Joe DX. and it aims to blend human creativity with AI assistance in a way that maximizes both innovation and individual well-being.
Okay, so it sounds like a fascinating approach. Can you tell us more about the core principles of Joe DX and how it differs from DSM?
Well, one of the key distinctions is the emphasis on what he calls mob AI, which involves using AI to facilitate group work and distribute responsibility in a way that caters to individual comfort and preferences. So it's about leveraging the power of collective intelligence without sacrificing individual well-being.
So it's not just about maximizing efficiency, it's also about creating a work environment that is both productive and humane. This raises another interesting question. How does Joe DX address the legal accountability challenges that we discussed earlier in relation to DSM?
That's a great question, and it's one that we'll explore in more depth as we continue our deep dive into the world of digital self-management and the innovative work of Joe Justice.
Stay tuned as we go a little bit deeper into the nuances of this approach and its potential impact on the future of work.
Well, Joe DX tackles the legal accountability challenge by really emphasizing transparency and distributed responsibility within the group. So while the AI provides recommendations and kind of assists in decision-making, the ultimate responsibility lies with the team members who actually contribute to the AI's knowledge base and approve its suggestions.
So it creates a system where accountability is shared rather than concentrated in a single individual or algorithm.
Exactly. And it aligns with Joe's overall philosophy of empowering individuals and fostering collaboration. It's not about replacing human judgment with algorithms, but enhancing human capabilities through AI assistance.
Earlier, we talked about Tesla's, 1,000-year goals, these incredibly ambitious long-term objectives that really drive the company's overall mission. Does Joe DX incorporate this concept of purpose-driven work?
It absolutely does. In fact, Joe argues that a strong sense of purpose is essential for any successful implementation of Joe DX. He believes that when people are working on something they truly believe in, something that aligns with their values, they're more likely to be engaged, creative, and resilient in the face of challenges.
That makes sense. When you're passionate about your work, it's not just a job, right? It's a contribution to something much bigger than yourself.
Precisely. And this sense of purpose becomes even more crucial in a system like Joe DX, where individuals have a high degree of autonomy and responsibility.
It sounds like Joe DX is more than just a management system almost. It's almost like a philosophy of work. It's a way of thinking about how humans and technology can collaborate to achieve ambitious goals while also prioritizing individual well-being.
I think that's a very insightful observation. Joe's work is really challenging us to rethink the traditional paradigms of work and to imagine new possibilities for a future where technology empowers us rather than dictates to us.
And speaking of rethinking traditional paradigms, one of the most intriguing aspects of Joe DX is this idea of mob AI. Can you explain a bit more about how that works in practice?
Sure. So imagine a team of engineers working together on a complex design problem. Instead of relying solely on their individual expertise, they have access to an AI system that's been trained on this vast database of engineering knowledge and best practices.
So the AI acts as a sort of collective intelligence, kind of augmenting the team's capabilities.
Exactly. The AI can suggest different design approaches, analyze potential flaws, and even generate prototypes based on the team's input. But the crucial point is that the AI doesn't make the final decisions. The human team members retain control and make the ultimate call based on their judgment and experience.
So it's a true collaboration between human and artificial intelligence.
Precisely. And this collaborative approach extends to other aspects of the work as well. The AI can help with task allocation, scheduling, and even conflict resolution, but always with human oversight and input.
It sounds like Joe DX is really pushing the boundaries of how we think about teamwork and leadership in a very technology-driven world.
It certainly is. And while it's still early days for Joe DX, it offers a very tantalizing glimpse into a future where work is not only more efficient, but also more fulfilling and humane.
This has been a fascinating exploration of digital self-management and Joe DX. I'm curious to know what you think our listeners should take away from this discussion. What are the key insights that you hope they'll ponder after listening to this episode?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is that the future of work is not predetermined. We have a choice in how we shape the relationship between humans and technology.
It's not about simply accepting the inevitability of automation, but rather about actively designing systems that empower people and enhance their capabilities.
Exactly. And Joe's work, both with DSM and Joe DX, shows us that it's possible to create systems that are both highly efficient and deeply human-centered.
It's about finding that sweet spot where technology amplifies our strengths and helps us achieve our full potential, both individually and collectively.
Precisely. And as we move into an era of unprecedented technological change, that's a vision worth striving for. It's been a really thought-provoking conversation for sure. And I think it's clear that Joe Justice's work with both digital self-management and Joe DX presents a really compelling vision of the future of work.
Absolutely. He's not just talking about incremental improvements to existing systems. He's really reimagining how organizations can operate in a world where technology plays such a central role.
Yeah, and one of the things that struck me about Joe's approach is this focus on building systems that are both adaptable and resilient. He really emphasizes the importance of creating organizations that can quickly respond to change and kind of learn from their mistakes.
And that's a crucial point, especially in today's rapidly evolving business environment, right? The ability to adapt and innovate is no longer a nice to have. It's a matter of survival for a lot of companies.
Precisely. And Joe argues that traditional, hierarchical management structures are simply too slow and inflexible to keep up with this pace of change. He believes that we need to move towards these more decentralized, data-driven models like DSM and Joe DX.
But even with the most sophisticated technology, there's always a risk of things going wrong. Earlier, we touched on the question of legal accountability in a system that's being driven by AI. How does Joe DX address this challenge in practical terms?
Well, Joe proposes a system of distributed responsibility where the human team members actually remain ultimately accountable for the decisions made by the AI. So the AI acts more as an advisor, providing recommendations and insights, but the final decision always rests with the human team.
It's about leveraging the power of AI without kind of abdicating that human responsibility.
Exactly. And then to ensure transparency, Joe DX also incorporates a really detailed audit trail that tracks all AI recommendations, human decisions, and kind of the rationale behind those decisions. So this creates a system of accountability that can be very easily reviewed and scrutinized if necessary.
Makes a lot of sense. It provides a very clear record of who made what decisions and why, which is essential for building trust and, ensuring ethical conduct.
Yeah, it also addresses some of the legal concerns surrounding AI by creating a clear framework for assigning responsibility when things do go wrong.
Joe DX, with its focus on this shared responsibility, seems like it would require a pretty significant shift in mindset, both for individuals and for organizations.
That's true. It requires a culture of trust and transparency and collaboration. Individuals need to be comfortable working in a more autonomous environment, and organizations need to be willing to empower their employees and give them the freedom to make those decisions.
But wouldn't that create a risk of, chaos or inconsistency if everyone is kind of making their own decisions?
Well, Joe DX addresses that by providing these very clear guidelines and principles that govern decision-making. And the AI system actually also plays a role in ensuring consistency by flagging any decisions that might deviate from those established protocols or best practices. So it's about finding the right balance between autonomy and alignment.
It's clear that Joe Justice is a visionary thinker who's really pushing the boundaries of what's possible in the realm of work and management. What are your final thoughts on his work and the implications for our listeners?
Well, I think Joe's work is a really powerful reminder that the future of work is not something that will simply happen to us. We have the power to shape it through the choices we make and the systems we create. So by embracing innovation and prioritizing human well-being and harnessing the power of technology responsibly, we can create a future of work that is both productive and fulfilling.
That's an inspiring message to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of digital self-management and Jody Day. We hope this episode has given you some food for thought and perhaps even sparked some ideas about how you can create a more innovative and human-centered workplace. Until next time, keep exploring and keep learning.